Joshua had been a student in one of the best charter schools in Baltimore City. And while it served a great purpose for my older son, and he was grandfathered in because of being a sibling, and we initially were like really excited about not having to go through the lottery process again. And we felt that this was a good place for our older son, and so that it would have served Joshua. And it didn't turn out to work for Joshua, although it is and was and is still a good school. It wasn't the school for him. And what we found was that although it was what you would consider a progressive charter school, it was still too restrictive for Joshua. It did not allow him to go deep in the things that he was significantly interested in. So he leans towards math and sciences and technology and art. And he felt, in his own words, that he was never given quite enough time to do those things. And he never could get the reasoning behind the schedule and the very specific start and end times. He just struggled with that as a part of his personality, actually. And he also struggled with the notion that he really wasn't given freedom to explore. It was just too constrained for Joshua. I consider him to be a very intellectually demanding child, and he's a person that requires justification and understanding. And we wanted to be supportive of that, and he wasn't able to get that within the school system. They were still bound by external forces of their own that meant that Joshua had to progress a certain way within a certain amount of time. And it really missed the mark around the areas where he was flourishing. They weren't necessarily recognized because there was still a scale or metrics of sort that were not necessarily in alignment with how he was growing and how he was being successful in the school system. And so that eventually transitioned into a set of behavioral issues that just progressively got worse. And it was frustrating for me, it was frustrating for his dad, and it was frustrating for Joshua. There were times when we would get a phone call and Joshua would literally be screaming at the top of his lungs. And it was so heartbreaking to hear him in pain. He really felt, you could hear the pain. And my reaction was almost always, that just doesn't sound like Joshua. Now he has a strong personality and he's pretty sure of himself. And so obstinate is a word I would probably use to describe him. But the visceral pain and expression was a little out of alignment with who we knew him to be as a child. And so we worked with the school system, with the principal and the social worker, and it was almost as if he was in a clinical hospital setting. The check-ins, he was getting daily check-ins in the morning and the afternoon, and things kept escalating. And I almost felt like it was so, the check-ins and the monitoring was so almost oppressive that it was starting to be even beyond the restrictions within the school setting. And then because it moved on to behavioral issues, then Joshua started getting suspended. And it got so bad that for a 1 month period, he was out of school more than he was in school. And he was 7 at the time. And this just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right for us. We even moved on to getting him seen by a behavioral therapist who gave Joshua like a really short test to see whether or not it was competency or learning capabilities. And Joshua, of course, did fine in the reading and he did fine in the math. And the physician actually said to him, he asked him whether or not he believed his teacher liked him. And he said no, that he didn't think his teacher liked him. And the physician then asked, give me an example of when you get frustrated in school. And Joshua used an example of wanting to complete a math paper, and it was time to move on. And Joshua also mentioned times when he had questions, and his questions couldn't be answered, and he had to hold his questions. And the physician said to him and to us, well, it seems as if you're probably a little bored. You're not being challenged in a way that's interesting to you, and you simply are just going to have to wait until your teacher catches up. And he recommended medicine to help with Joshua's behavior. And in that meeting, I said, well, I'm not really interested in having him conform to the school. I'd rather they figure out a way to accommodate him. And so that was kind of like the next to the last straw for us to decide to move him out of that setting. The final straw was after we did our shadow week here at Arts and Ideas, Joshua came back for one day, and he was suspended on that day. And so it was shocking because we were like, he hasn't been here for a week. What's happening here? And there's got to be a clue that it's the setting and that it wasn't Joshua, because the feedback that we got from Arts and Ideas was that Joshua did amazing. At the time, Brooke was here, and Caroline, of course. And we spoke with them, and when we described to them the issues that Joshua was facing, they were like, Joshua? That Joshua? And we're like, yes, the same Joshua. And then I emailed the principal that night and said, it's fine, this will be Joshua's last day.